All right. So, hi everybody. Thank you for coming. Um, oh look, I decided to just try again with Facebook and it's saying it's preparing for live stream. So,
There we go.
da-da-da.
Oh, awesome.
Perfect. It's great. Even has my thing off. So, okay, great. Awesome. Wait, let me just try what's it called? Oh, and now I don't see an option for YouTube. Oh well. All right, we got one working. Perfect. Yeah, maybe I had to be recording first. I don't know. Okay, perfect. So just like a little intro, because everybody that's live knows who I am. And some of you might have seen John before because John and I did, do you remember a talk? I don't know when that was, but on 3D, 4D consciousness. So, and that's up in my group. So if he looks familiar, that might be why. But John and I met online like almost a decade ago, and he's a therapist in Cincinnati, and has a private practice and mostly focuses on couples, would you say? Um,
Yeah, I mean, mostly I work with men, and
Men.
so I see a lot of the couples where the guys generally doesn't want to come to couples therapy.
Gotcha. Okay.
They come in to see me, yeah. But that's generally
No.
what I do.
Nice. So, so anyways, so yeah, so John and I talk and we have a lot of, I'd say, similar views, which might be more fringe than the rest of the therapy community, maybe I'd say. Um, so we wanted to talk about, and I titled it Unpacking Victimhood. So maybe we can talk about what victimhood is. Um, and I know it's a little in this disease in the therapy community. And like before we started, John was saying how that kind of feels like this subconscious, contagious thing that like spreads through. Because we've noticed just some trends that haven't really helped aid towards people growing and moving forward, and in fact, maybe keeping them back. So yeah, let's start by talking about like what we mean when we say victimhood. Do you want to talk about that, John?
Yeah, sure. When we're in a victim stance, we're in a place of disempowerment. So the agency or the lack thereof isn't there. And I think another like psychological term you're probably familiar with, and other people might be as well, which is like locus of control.
Hmm.
So my locus of control is external. Then I can tend to be in the victim position because I'm looking for things outside of myself to help me or fix me, save me, supplement me. And so when we're in the victim position, generally life's going to be happening to me. Life is against me. I'm trying to apply force to withstand challenges in life, or I'm trying to push my desires or my agenda forward against life. So the victim stance is always going to have this feel of opposition to it, where instead of being in the flow of life or a part of life or a part of the collective whole, I'm separate or opposite, and it's a very kind of telltale sign or position of the ego state
Hmm.
as well from the ego's perspective. So that's how I look at it.
Yeah, no, I love it. I knew you'd have a good, pretty concise and clear um definition. At least I think it is. And if people have questions, like specific questions, put them in the chat. Um, but yeah, so one of my questions is like, how do you feel? Can you not see John? Oh shit.
No,
I
I,
cannot.
I can only see you.
Oh man. I wonder if it's how, and I'm guessing if all right, here, I'm gonna have to do it like this.
There you go.
There
Ah,
he is.
Okay, you can see him, right?
Yeah, it should.
All right,
Yes, yes, I can.
all
Okay.
right. Sorry about that, everybody. But you got to see my beautiful face a little bit more then. Um, okay, so I wanted to ask about if you want to talk a little bit about diagnosing and like identity with like a victim identity that comes sometimes from diagnosing. Do you see that? I guess what I've noticed in my experience from being a therapist, and this wouldn't be with everybody, it would depend on, where they're at with their level of consciousness. Where I would struggle with people is sometimes they would identify, with a diagnosis and then turn that into like a victim, like, well, I can't do that because I have this, right? And it became this like entrapment around that.
Well, it's difficult to get away from anything that you're trying to overcome if you're identifying with it. So if I have a diagnosis and that becomes part of my identity, then subconsciously, why would you want to get away from your diagnosis, right? And so, I mean, ultimately, like diagnosis is there for information to give us kind of insight on, kind of a range or broad spectrum of like what's going on with me or the person that I'm helping. But
Yeah.
yeah, if I'm identifying with it as an individual, like that's going to be difficult. Same thing with the victim. Like if I'm identifying as the person who is a victim or who's been victimized, then it's going to be very difficult to shed that, at least from a subconscious level, because it's providing me that place where I'm actually falsely empowered,
Yeah.
right? And I'm deriving my empowerment from being the victim. Because a lot of times, victim stance, and with diagnosis is I'm getting help, I'm getting attention, I'm getting people are recognizing my pain, they're listening to me. Like you're getting, in essence, you're getting a lot of things that you probably didn't get, if I'm guessing, in childhood, and now you're getting it through other means,
Yeah.
whether the individual realizes it or not.
Yeah.
So the mind, the ego mind will grab onto things like a diagnosis. So we can make a club out of a diagnosis. Like,
They just
say
they
you and I could have
yeah.
a certain diagnosis, and we could make a club out of it. And
Yeah.
only people who have that diagnosis are welcome to be in our club, right? And if that's bringing belonging and like cohesion to my life, why would I ever want to get away from that negative, uh, in this case, label or literal diagnosis.
Yeah. All right.
So
If you
I mean, I've seen that.
yeah. Um get your chat open too so you can see what people are saying if you don't have it open.
Yeah.
Um Sean, I don't know if I want to talk about false recovered memories. I feel like that. Um, unless if John wants to talk about that.
A lot you can get into in this. I was just gonna say too, to kind of start off, is some of my experiences early on when I was starting off as a therapist got me questioning like the gut kind of feeling that I had about what something's off here.
Yeah.
And I'll give you a quick kind of anecdotal example, and maybe something I've told you before. But so I was working at the VA hospital at the beginning of my therapy uh, therapist career or whatever, and specifically, working with um, veterans, obviously at the VA, but they're substance dependent. Okay, and so something that I noticed was that we'd spend a lot of our time and resources, especially around the holidays, to providing activities and charity and giveaway to these veterans, and we would have them come down to the auditorium and then we would have these events or these parties or whatever, basically, and then all these service organizations would show up, like the DAV and the American Legion and other things, and they would like give these guys all kinds of gifts and food, which is fine in and of itself. But I was thinking that, when I was a veteran myself, like the the kind of demeanor of the service member is to serve, and here we are just giving, and in a way that it almost disempowered these
Mm.
guys. And I brought up a question at some point at some level or meeting. I said, why don't we get these guys back energized with their role,
Oh,
where they feel comfortable giving
yeah.
and creating and providing back to either each other or the community. And I was like, I got looked at like I had four heads. Like, what are you talking about? You're like, we're the providers, and these guys are they didn't these terms weren't used, so I be clear, they're less than because they're suffering.
Right.
And so now a hierarchy is created where the poor people who are down here, who are suffering with mental health and dependence issues, have to be helped by the people up here.
Right. Yeah.
And I didn't like that. I was like, wait a second, if we want to get them healthy and back on their feet, shouldn't we be uh, helping them see their potential, or maybe even energizing them to things that they used to do as veterans? And I
Yeah.
think it kind of took me into a way. I was like, are we really helping people here,
No.
right? Like, or are we kind of are we keeping our roles kind of intact, where as the provider, we're the hero or the savior, and then down here are the people that have to remain in these victim positions to keep us, one, revenue flowing, or two, uh, make us feel good about ourselves as therapists. So they're just
Exactly.
experienced early on.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I kind of noticed too, then as like the helper, yeah, it's like, well, I need to look at you as a victim in order to be the helper, because then if they're not a victim anymore, how am I the helper? Right? If
Yeah.
that's the dynamic that's set up. But then I also noticed, and I don't know if you want to move into your triangle thing yet, um, that if you're in that, if there's always a victim and a helper, I would notice the people that identify as helpers in that state identify as a victim and, from, another way, if that makes sense, like
Yeah.
different
So
states.
I think I understand what you're saying. I think that it's just part of human nature. So I can see my victimness in others, and then I can be that provider or hero.
Yes.
But then I
Yes.
never have to work on myself.
Yes. Yes.
You get to be the part of me that needs help, even though you're separate from me as another person. And I can be the person that I always wanted to be, right?
Yeah.
For myself. But that makes sense. So there's a lot of projection going on, and it's subconscious. Um, the triangle is Cartman's triangle, drama triangle, Stephen Cartman, and the triangle is basically, the three aspects of the triangle are the hero or the savior, the victim, and then the perpetrator. Okay. Um, and in that drama triangle, which is a state of consciousness, I have to be in one of those positions, right? And like I was telling you earlier, the one position I'll never admit that I'm in is the perpetrator, right? I'm either going to be the victim or I'm going to be the hero, right? Which means then I have to assign a perpetrator or a instigator or a villain to something or someone else. So a circumstance or an individual or a group of people, right? To fulfill my level of consciousness as that victim, or if I'm seeing myself as from a therapist perspective, potentially as the hero or the savior. So I
Yeah.
actually have to create the drama. People have to play roles so the drama can play out.
Yep.
That's the gist of the triangle.
Cool. Awesome. We got some good questions too. Um, I and even I do want to share too, like when I was going through a real hard time and I was in a lot of shame, I actually identified as like the perpetrator, as the like bad guy. But even that, that kept me stuck, right? And then I always simultaneously felt victim of identifying myself in that way, keeping myself like in this loop. Um, and so I think, it's not as common that people do that, but really, no matter where you are in the triangle, you're going to stay stuck in this really unhealthy dynamic. Um, and Nehemiah's question, I know John and I wanted to address, is there a healthy mode of operation for helpers that doesn't perpetuate the victim mentality? So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, it has to come from a place of understanding yourself first and foremost, right? So, what's the saying? Like, heal yourself, right? Like,
yep,
provider or therapist, heal yourself. So, you have to understand yourself. Not, not in completion. I mean, everyone's a work in progress, but you have to understand your own stuff or your own shadow, because if you don't do that, you're going to project it onto other people, right? And I think that like if there's a healthy framework where you're um, working with clients that doesn't perpetuate the victim mentality, is really just to show them in ways that they are not the victim. So if they, like, if people go to a place that use this as an example where they're talking about their thoughts or their feelings as they present as a victim, we don't want to buy into that being a reality as a therapist, right? We want to be able to just acknowledge, like, those are thoughts, those are misperceptions in so many ways. And then the feelings that can create that are actually what needs to be worked on, right? And so, I mean, my stance on this is that no adult can actually be a victim, period, right? Only children can be victims. And as a therapist, if we're helping people understand where they've never healed from their being victimized, and it's going to generally be at a younger state, that's where it's going to stem from, then that's where our work would lie. So, like, we're not buying into this reality that the person's actually a victim, but as a therapist, we want to be able to say, like, hey, obviously, we're respecting and understanding the thoughts that come with that, but let's look a little deeper and find out where are these feelings coming from, or these thought patterns, because that's where the healing work is going to be done.
yeah,
And you cannot heal and remain a victim. So
yeah,
anytime I know as an individual, even as a therapist, like, if I'm seeing myself as a victim, I know that my thinking is off, it's distorted, so I need to correct my thinking. Like, that's a misdirected thought, right? But if I continue to have misdirected thoughts as a therapist, where I'm seeing myself as the savior and the other person as the victim, or I'm just pumping up their story, I'm just like, hey, they're coming to see me and they're talking about someone who's hurt them, and all I'm doing is like, yeah, right? And there's some degree, it's good to, like,
mhm,
align with your client, but if all we're doing is just getting into that drama triangle with that client, I'm not doing them any good.
yeah. So if you're up and working and being productive, you're a survivor. You said something else, Joel.
How do you do that for friends while still validating them? Um,
Yeah, I
you,
mean,
I mean, you can only do that as much as the friend wants to see their own truth, right? I think that some of that ingredient in friendship, at least from my experience, has been, certain friends you have are just going to be closer than others, and there's certain things that I'm going to say to some of my friends that I wouldn't say to others.
yeah,
Um,
like, yeah, knowing their tolerance level,
yeah.
and I think most people that are friends with me know, I have a certain threshold in which I am going to be honest. And I think that has made it so, yeah, I, my friend group, changes and is different and, so forth. And we'll say some of those things.
Yeah, it's really a level of conscious awareness. So if you're this is how we grow out of friend groups or friends and we find other friends. So there's just certain people who aren't going to resonate with us. Not that we're better or less, just putting that out there, but just if we're evolving and growing, then friends we might become less connected with them.
Yeah.
The more connected we are with a friend, the easier it is to have that language of understanding. And I'm telling you this because I love you, not because I'm trying to hurt you or criticize you. I'm
Yeah.
telling you this because it's occurred to me that, and I'm aware of this, and you take this for what it's worth. Like, that would be the sentiment. And then, of course, coming from the direction is I'm able to take that in because I know that you care about me, right? I know that you're my friend, and I know that you love me. So the from the therapeutic like position and relationship, the challenge is solely about the therapist taking the risk by speaking the truth to the client,
Yeah. And
right?
attuning to
And
that,
tuning
like,
to them,
yeah.
right? So there's art there too. It's not like you do it on the first day. It's not like like you get to know the person and like, but you're working with that and you're angling it in a way where you just don't want to rest in that triangle with them. If we're talking specifically about the drama triangle.
Yeah. Can I remain powerful in validating my own emotions or experiences, or do I need to validate my emotions first and then work on making sure I'm not in the victim mindset? I find it I find it helpful to like validate the emotion first by recognize like it's there. Because if we try to shift without like looking at it, um, that's usually a form of avoidance. Like, oh, that's not powerful, right? And it's like a hot potato it out. But the thing is, you don't actually work with the emotion. So it ends up coming out in other ways. So you can still recognize so if I'm feeling wronged about something, right? So even though, John and I talk about this stuff, it's not like, and I'll speak for myself, but I'm guessing for John too, it's not like we don't go through life without ever feeling wronged or upset about something. But that can be like oh, wait, this is going on, and recognize and then kind of be curious about it. Like, well, what's that about? What's going on? What unmet need is getting triggered right now, so that then I take responsibility over that, right? And then so how can I meet that need within myself, or what do I need to do here? And that other person was just merely a mirror to like highlight that thing within me, and now I get to work on it, right? So then it becomes almost nothing about the other person, and it's actually just a light shining on my shadow that I get to work on. And then that's how not I can still use the emotion, validate the emotion without getting into a victim mindset. I don't know if that answers the question. Well, if you want to add to that, John.
Well, I think the the thing that I'm thinking about and like what can trip up. I mean, this isn't specific to what you just said, but can trip up a lot of like the ins and outs. Like you mentioned, I it's not like it's not human nature to see ourselves as victims. I mean, it is. It's part of just the ego mind. It's just
Hmm.
part of who we are. But it's really important to distinguish the difference between responsibility and blame and shame,
Hmm.
right? And so maybe we see this played out a bit when we hear the terms like victim blaming or shaming. And not that there isn't cases where that's true. It's just that there's a lot more that goes into working yourself out of a victim stance than just saying, well, if I'm not a victim, then I guess I'm the one to blame, right?
Mm, mm.
That's not true, right? That like responsibility is about being sovereign and free as you are as an individual, right? And that's where you're healing.
Yes.
And so you can only heal when you take responsibility, right? And so it's almost like with anything. I mean, the immature mind cannot do two things at once. It does this or it does that, right? It does black and white, right, wrong. It doesn't. The mature mind does the middle ground. It does two things, like you can take responsibility without feeling shame and blame, right? And that's a practice in and of itself,
Yeah.
because the reactive mind so badly wants to just find a perpetrator, right?
Right.
It wants to cast out blame, and it wants to stay away from being the perpetrator. So
Right.
it tries to stay away from being blamed.
Yeah. And then you're also just that's just showing you're staying in that triangle that John was talking about when you're in that instead of moving beyond it. Like we don't yeah, the ego needs to blame, but when you move beyond the ego, there is no blame. It just is. Like it's just you're presented, something got thrown in your lap, right? And now you get to decide what to do with it, right?
Not yeah, you have to. That's the thing, right?
Yeah.
It's like life isn't fair,
Yeah.
and that's really a tough lesson for all of us to learn at some point. When we
Mhm.
fully learn, like, oh man, like life really isn't fair, and it's not designed to be fair,
No.
so that we can actually grow into our own, from an empowered point of view, actually grow into my own, like, capabilities, or whatever word I'm trying to find here. It's like life is giving you opportunities to see your own potential every single day, right? And if I'm seeing my growth opportunities, right, as negatives and purely negatives, or purely things happening to me, I'll never see them. This goes into kind of gratitude practice in a way. I never see them as catalyst for life showing me who I actually am. Because in the victim position, I'm only seeing life saying, well, this is what life's telling me when I'm not. And look at all these hard things coming to me. And gosh, things are so hard for me. And it's like, yeah, but like it's hard for everybody. Don't you see that? It's not
Not
just
when,
you,
right, but not if you're a victim, then therefore somebody else has to be a
right?
perpetrator.
You're
And
always separate.
yeah.
And from the mind's point of view, as a victim, you're always separate. You can't buy, like, it's a story, hence the drama. It's not real. Like, I never liked that term in the triangle, because it's drama. And what's drama? Drama is a story. It's a play,
Yeah.
right? So when we're healing and we're getting out of that level of consciousness, we're exiting the story. There's no more story.
Yeah. Well, you
It's
know
not that the story isn't helpful. The story, like, it's like, why do you like any good movie? Because you see yourself in the story. It's not that it's not helpful, but towards the end of the story, any good movie, like one that's a classic probably, there's a guide who tells the main character who they really are, and then he dies or she dies, and then the main character lives on to find out their potential. Like, we all know that the story is purposeful, but the story is not the thing itself. I guess
right.
that's what I'm trying to say there.
If life has just given me whatever, why couldn't it have given me more? Um, Yeah, and the mind's still going to make up, to kind of go off what you're saying, John, the mind's still going to make up stories. The ego is still going to make up stories. But as you raise your level of consciousness, you see it as a story. You see it as a play, right? So when you can see it that as the drama, as the play, as the actors on the stage, you know,
Right, right.
um, then yeah, then you can not get caught up in it and be like,
But
my
but
life is falling apart.
but it's so what's so cool about that too, just from the frame, like if we were gonna be at a higher level of conscious awareness and what you just said there. And what's cool is then we can utilize that to see ourselves in every single one of those roles and its truth, right?
Yes.
So break that down. Okay. So as the victim, what does that show me? It shows me where my trauma is, my wounding, my pain, right? It's showing me directly where that is because again, if I were to actually do the healing work to get out of that victim stance, I have to see where I actually have been victimized in my life without holding on to that role. Okay, so that's helpful there. Where am I the hero or the savior? There's truth there too. It means I'm empowered. I have influence on other people. I can help them. My words and my actions have impact, right? I am important. There's value there, right? And we all have that. And then the third one, where am I the perpetrator? Where has my actions or my behavior caused harm to other people? So that I might account for that and and make amends for that and help them heal from that.
Hmm.
But the important thing is I never want to get into one of those and totally hold on to it in completion,
Right.
which is what we can end up doing when we're like feeling stuck or you know I'm not trying to beat up on therapy too much, but if you're going to a therapist for multiple years and you're not getting any better, something's off.
Hmm.
It's like that shouldn't be the thing. So um, we want to be able to use that the mind's conceptualization of reality and life. Maybe from that uh, uh, the drama perspective, like you mentioned, as a good thing to understand ourselves even more.
Yeah. Yeah. And kind of like back to your point, John, if you're working on something and it's not getting any better, so that the person supporting you then likely is also caught up in the same level of consciousness that you are. So you're just, you know, you become like an echo chamber, right? Of that own level. Um, and and so it's really important when you're kind of working on these things, working with people that you know are operating at a different level so that you know you can get get out of the loop that you're in. Um and yeah, and so that's, I mean, for me personally, and yeah, not to beat up on therapy, I noticed that I didn't really start getting out of where I was feeling stuck um until I was working with mentors that have kind of, exited that as well, and not that it doesn't exist in therapists, because obviously, like John's right here, he's a therapist, it's not everyone, but um and I found that triggering, right? So I also found, when you're moving out of that state of consciousness, the people you're working with and the ones that are supporting you on that, they will likely say things that trigger you, but that's what I needed to hear. Or like Amelia, you were asking about friends and things like that. Like, yeah, you can, speak the truth, and that will likely upset them. Um, you know, but that's why it's like that own commitment of like, I'm not here to feel good. Or another thing John was saying reminded me, I think it's like Eckhart Tolle, like quote, something around life isn't here to make you happy. It's not here for you to feel good. It's here for you to raise your level of conscious awareness. And everything that life gives you is to teach you that. So I think it does require some level of understanding that and commitment to that so that you can tolerate the uncomfortable stuff that comes up as you're working on it.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of good in our friends upsetting us, like for the right reasons. You know what I mean? When someone plants a seed with you and by saying something and eventually like it pisses you off,
Yeah.
deep down, there's truth to it. Like there's a lot of good in that.
Yeah.
There's risks too, and any good relationship takes risk. Like playing it safe or like walking on eggshells around each other, or just like or whatever, placating each other is not a relationship,
No.
right?
No.
So whether that's a therapist relationship with you or you to your client or friendships or spouses, like you have to take risk and tell truth to each other with the with the chance that you're going to upset the other person. But what are you really upsetting anyway? Like you're upsetting their false ego mind, right? It's like, you see this with your kids, like your kids are like, I can't do it. And it's so I'm so angry, and you're like, yeah, you can. They're like, I can't. They get mad. You're like, well, I know you can do it.
Yeah.
I know it's upsetting, but I'm not going to give up on you, and I'm not going to give in to you either, right? Like they may not like that, but
Um,
ultimately, it's what they need.
right, right.
Seeing people at like especially with your kids, like you're seeing them at a higher level that they can't see in themselves, so that you can help bring their consciousness up to where you know that they are. It's the same thing with anything when someone's helping us as an
Hmm.
individual, or I'm helping someone else. Like when you're pointing out someone's blind spot in a positive way, like they're not necessarily going to like it,
Yeah.
you
Right.
know,
And
and
they're not
they're
supposed to. And
not
if they
supposed to,
did, it wouldn't be a
right?
big opportunity for growth, right? Because you would
Yeah,
already have been there.
yeah, yeah,
I
right.
like Nehemiah's comment here because I want to touch on that. I feel like I have a good grasp on all this, but it hasn't reached my inner self or heart yet because I haven't seen real lasting change. Like it's not ingrained. So it does take a lot of repetition and constant work, you know. I used to get caught up on that. Like, am I seeing the lasting change? Is this happening? And so forth. And I also recognize that that was my mind kind of coming in and over analyzing, overthinking. Um, and it's really just about if I notice I'm off, right? If I notice I'm in an unempowered state, instead of like I don't know, making up a story about why I'm feeling unempowered or what's going on. Actually, I told my group this yesterday because I had to do it yesterday. I was in the shower and I had this like collapse of energy and I just felt like everything, I felt like I really messed something up. And I was like, wait. And then I was thinking, why? What's going on? Why it's going? And then I was just like, Stacy, stop. Just stop. You don't need to solve anything. You don't need to do anything. Do what you ever need to do to flip, right? And move forward. So that's something I want to offer about oh, I'm not there yet, because that's definitely, that's been a big story in my life.
Yeah, I think we all feel that at some point. I would say, or most people, like like, is this actually creating lasting change? And it's a great question, and I think that the answer is that, I guess that's part of the old narrative that you're working out. And I think that if you're really intentional and consistent, I mean, not to like some strict like
Right.
same degree, but you're paying attention to yourself when you're working on yourself, like that part of your mind that doesn't want to like let go or change is going to start saying things to you like, well, is it really working? Are you sure? Like you seem like you're failing a lot. Like that's just the natural reaction of that thinking process. It does not want to let go.
And it won't let go. It's always going to be there, I guess is the
Right.
other thing
It's
too. Like,
always going to be there.
yeah.
So it's a great point, right? So, the question that Nehemiah is asking, which is, I don't know if I've reached it yet, but maybe it's not, there's not really a destination or reaching. It's more like, can I see that that's part of my thinking process that I'm trying to uh, help work away from, as it's got its negative, kind of impact on me.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm not my thoughts. I'm not my feelings. I have feelings. I have thoughts, along those same lines, and just knowing that there's no giving up, even if we wanted to. There's resting, you can like take a break and, like relax. There's no pressure here. There's no race, but like there's no giving up either. So life will allow us to kind of come back online and get back to what we need to do when we're ready, if we do need to take a break.
Yeah. Um, I know we probably kind of touched on this a little bit, but we wanted to talk about towards the end, maybe like some things to stay out of, the
Yeah.
victim mindset. I feel like, yeah, we kind of touched on some things like you talked about. gratitude. I think that's um really helpful. And then no ungratitude, because I used to, my ego hated gratitude and I would fight against it. Um, like start with what is aligned. Start with what is true. And even if it's the smallest thing, it's important that it feels in resonance with you because more of the discord, if you're trying to practice gratitude and it doesn't feel aligned, that just gives the ego so much power to like come in and cause havoc. At least that was my experience, anyways.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's obviously all a practice. I mean, I struggle like anyone else, like it's a constant practice. And I think the more that you actually practice, the harder it gets. Like it just keeps, I don't know, maybe like like stages in a video game, like the boss levels keep getting tougher and tougher over time. Maybe it's designed to be that way. But I was gonna say too, reminding myself in terms of how to get out of that victim stance and things I can do in a practical sense, um, asking for help
Mm.
and accepting help. So saying yes, right? Like practicing saying yes. And then the other side of that is saying no.
Right.
And and it's very easy to get into a place of victimhood. Let's say, when you say no to something, I'm sorry, when you say yes to something that you should say no to, and then you use that later on as a reason why you're upset, you know, you have to assert your desire.
Yeah.
So if I'm saying yes to something that I don't really want to say yes to, and I know there's a lot of nuance with this, depending on the relationship, but um, you will feel resentment and feel like the victim ultimately,
Yeah.
right? You don't really want it. So it's getting more in tune with what you desire by practicing saying yes more often when you want it, and then saying no, which is probably more challenging,
Yes. Yeah.
setting those limits. And that's a really good way, I feel like, to get out of that victim stance because you're you're acting through that, uh, your that aspect of self that's sovereign and free.
Yeah, and you're betraying yourself. And it's usually often in a people pleaser sort of way. Well, I'm going to say yes because this person wants this of me. And the reason why we do that is because we feel we're in lack, right? I need this person in my life in order for me to feel XYZ or to get XYZ, or I need to take on that job or that client because I need that money, right? So once we start shedding this lack,
Yeah.
it's so much easier to say no. And then when we say no, we don't get resentful and then we don't fall into the victimization.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And the people pleaser too, since you brought it up, and I think you're right. I think it's like the initial uh like attempt to take on the role of the savior.
Yes.
So if I can just please you, and then quickly you're into the victim position.
Right, right.
But it's like, no, there is no, I don't need to please anybody, right?
Yep.
Now the only people in my life I'm responsible for are my kids.
Hmm.
That's even different than pleasing them necessarily, depending on the situation. But like, hey, like it's not my job to please you. So you're getting out of that too, because that's a judgment. Like, why do I have to please you? Like, why are your desires more important than anyone else's or mine? Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's uncomfortable, and if we expect other people to please us and we're going to please others, or if we please others, we're going to expect others to please us, right? So then there's these unspoken agreements constantly happening. And that really gets us into trouble.
Yeah,
But I've been telling my almost 9-year-old when she asked me why about something, I'm like, my job isn't to make you happy, it's to teach you and and to keep you healthy as best that I can, based on what I understand and my knowledge and so forth. And I'm going to do the best I can with that to keep you safe and healthy. And then you get to do what, with what you want. But safety and health are paramount over your happiness in my book. So you can't have another cookie. Sorry.
Yeah, I know you're upset with me, but sorry. Yeah, I
But
like that a lot.
yeah.
That's a good one. You mean your kids thank you later. They don't like you in the moment, right? But it's like it's like I'm putting down like a down payment for like
Yeah.
future good relations with them by doing the hard no.
Right. And we can do that with everybody, not just kids, not just parenting. So that's with any relationship, it's with work and everything is by honoring that no, because you need to stay in integrity with you and your values. And
Right.
that helps you to feel sovereign when you do that, right? So that's how you create your sovereign experience. If you're like, Stacey, I don't feel sovereign because all this bullshit is happening in my life. You're letting the external dictate that you're not sovereign. But if you act sovereign, you will get that feedback eventually that you are, and to help reinforce it.
Yeah, yeah, I like what you said there. That makes sense. There's because this is definitely quite a good question, and I think a lot of people think about this when we talk about like saying no in relationships. So like how did Sean said, how does that stack up with trading favors? Like at my work, a lot of my success relates to the contracts and connections I built by trading favors. Yeah, so that's a good point. So even in relationships, I'm sacrificing something. Let's say tomorrow I'm doing something for a friend, like I'm helping them with something. I don't really want to be doing that, or even this morning, maybe I'm doing something for someone, or not saying this morning directly, but like I'm doing something or I'm going to work and I don't really want to be doing it. But the reason why I'm doing a favor for somebody and I'm saying yes to it isn't because necessarily I want to do the actual thing. It's because it's upholding a value I have,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
And then when I can identify that, why it's important to me, it's just part of sacrifice and discipline. It's easier for me to allow that yes to be true on a deeper level and let go, right? So once I say yes and I'm agreeing to help out my sibling or my friend or my family member or my coworker, it's to um, give to the thing ultimately that I value, even though in that moment or in that task, it's really not the thing I want to be doing.
Yeah.
So it's more of a broader scale, but we have to do that kind of inner accepting of that yes too, so that we can let go. So then we don't hold on to the resentment.
Right. Yeah.
Don't feel the being a victim because I'm the one who said yes,
Yes.
right? Ultimately, and so I'm even if it's something I don't really want to be doing, but I know that it's good to do anyway. Whether that's going to exercise or again helping someone out or just doing something I don't really want to be doing in the moment. I can I can let go of that, feel like I'm obligated by understanding that it's going to something that I ultimately value that's more important than my immediate inconvenience.
And also just keep in mind too that, yeah, yes, that yes needs to come from someplace deeper because these are like unspoken contracts that you're talking about, Sean. So your yes doesn't imply their yes back. So yeah, so it does also need to come from, I think, a deeper place of I want to give because I want to give. And I'm going to trust in that giving because if I only do it in expectation of the favor in return, then we're going to get a lot of resentment and it's not going to feel
Um,
good at all.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, right. Because resentment is the natural reaction of your self letting you know that what you did was incongruent with
Right.
what the
Right.
desirable, right?
Exactly.
It's like
Yeah.
a, it's like a natural correcting system within us. But here's what we do. Like this, it's a good point. Like, because here's what we fail to see. Instead of understanding resentment to give us that information, I turn into the victim, and now I can blame you for
Yes.
why I feel this way.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Like,
Offloading
what
responsibility. Yes.
what a waste of an opportunity to learn something about yourself by blaming someone else or your circumstance.
Mhm. Do you have 11 o'clock, John?
I don't have an appointment. I do need to go in a few
Yeah,
minutes.
yeah, no, yeah,
Probably like
I got
3
a phone
minutes.
call too. I just wanted to make sure you didn't have to like run away right now. Um, Amelia helped me move my office furniture. That's why she said
That's cool.
that. Yeah, yeah, it's also yeah, not worth worrying about. And also like giving favors and doing things like uh, at one point yeah, it was kind of becoming like the spiritual practice for me of like I'm doing this for my own spiritual growth, right? To take on some sort of responsibility. And then it helped make it so it really wasn't about the other person at all. Like the past couple of summers I've been mowing my neighbor's lawn across the street while they're away for like 6 weeks. And I said that yes to that because I was like, oh, this feels like an opportunity um, for me to engage in a level of discipline and that I felt like taking on, right? So it really, again, so I turned it into a lesson undertaking about me. And so therefore my action isn't tethered energetic, right? We don't want these energetic cords, right? So if we can't say yes without an energetic cord, um,
Yeah.
I want to make sure I'm saying it right, then don't do it. I think you know what I'm saying. I don't know
Yeah,
if I'm doing
yeah.
it
I
correctly.
like that a lot. I think that's true because it's tying us into something that isn't ours, right?
Yeah.
And so whatever that is or looks like, it could be someone else's shame or projection, anger, guilt, resentment, or it could be tied in. The cord could be tied into our family history,
Yes.
right? Like this is what I was taught growing up. And a good person does this. And if you don't do that, you're a bad person. Now your cord's tied into that. And ultimately, we do better service to other people and help them when we're free and we're giving freely and we're giving out of love and not out of obligation or anything like that, a guilt or it just is better
Yeah. So Amelia,
ultimately.
energetic cord, Johnny might be a better at describing it than I am, but yeah.
Yeah, it's an attachment. It's hard to kind of describe. It's a good question. It'd be like um like if you a good way to put it would be like let's say I did get asked to do something to help somebody. Like, hey, can you help me move? And then tomorrow I can't do it because I have plans. But I mean, I could help for like an hour. But instead of telling them I could help, I say no. And they're like, oh yeah, I really struggled this weekend because I didn't get any help. And then I feel bad about it. I'm just making this up, right?
Yeah.
So the energetic cord is my guilt in this case attached to the other person's displeasure or inconvenience or their own sense of discomfort, right?
Yeah, there's just like that emotional connect. There's like that
Yeah. It's like I'm
it's a
responsible.
feeling.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, that's the way I look at it. It's like my responsibility for your experience. That's
yeah,
how I look at the energetic chords in that way.
yeah, yeah. Nehemiah dang. Yeah, I mean, especially like with family and things like that can be
Yeah.
super, super strong. So that's why they have things like cord cutting ceremonies or like
Yeah.
practices and all these things that you can do
Oh
because
yeah.
you actually
Yeah.
want
Yeah.
to be void of all of that. Because if you're not void of all of that, then you are likely not making decisions and actions based
Yeah.
on your own integrity, and you're doing it based off of other people's energy and not your own.
Right. Family is always the toughest. And,
Yeah.
some of these, if we want to talk about like chords, some of them are just stronger than others. And that's normal. But there's a lot of healing behind them.
Hmm. Yeah.
Right. Even though it might be difficult or even painful at times to work through letting go.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
but
and you can still have emotion too, especially with family and so forth. Like when my mom cries, I still cry, but it
sure.
does feel different than when I felt like I needed to do something about it or that
Yeah.
that shouldn't
Right.
be happening, right?
Yeah,
Be-
I think typically those chords are going to have a shame guilt
yeah,
energy, right? If not all the time. So as long as that's not there, like I can feel empathy with you and feel emotion with you, but you don't need to feel like bad, like feel in a lower resonance with someone else. Like that's not your obligation.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but well, this was a good talk. I have to.
Me too. Yeah, I got a phone call
Yeah.
to make. So
Okay.
thank
Good
you,
job.
John. Thank you for your time. Thanks for everyone for
Awesome.
coming. It's always more fun when you have like questions and engagement. At least I
Uh-huh.
have more fun that way.
Yeah. No, I like the questions, and thanks everybody for participating and asking these great questions. Yeah.
Well, all right. I'll talk with you guys later. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.